Hi, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast, and listen to it as you're driving along in your car, your truck, or put in those earbuds and take it all in while you're on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the relationship between popular consent to authority and moral decline, and how do we, if you like, arbitrage the two in the modern day Western society. Now, I'll start with moral decline. I remember as a watching 1960s movies and some stuff that I saw, reruns as a kid, that indicators of moral decline were if any society that would promote lesbians into positions of authority must be in moral. That was an indicator of just how far they deviated from the normal, the sensible, the reasonable, and so on. The lesbians that were depicted, I mean, you could see in, say, Colonel Klebb, the lesbian character in one of the James Bond movies, and also if homosexual men were promoted to positions of authority. So these were supposedly indicators of a society that could never be successful and could never prosper. And it was suggested that if there was a policy or a general attitude of putting these people in charge, rather than someone who may accidentally or somehow they were very good at their job and they kept their gay or lesbian attitudes and views to themselves, that type of thing, that sort of accidental thing where somebody meritoriously could achieve high office, but may incidentally, as a secondary issue, also have been gay or lesbian. So moral decline was considered to be, certainly at the time, considered to be reflected in these sort of things. So in the Soviet Union, putting lesbian women in as colonels and this sort of thing, and women in charge of things, that was it. I remember it was discussed at the time. This was a society that could never succeed. It could never prosper. It's never going to last that long. Now, as a kid, I didn't really follow that, or for that matter, think about it that much. But it's interesting that the Soviet system collapsed. Now, whether you say, well, it's because the communist system failed, well, sure, but equally in the communist system, they were creating tens of millions of jobs just for women, and giving them fancy titles, and they were putting them in supposed charitable groups and areas that were looking after retirement homes, but also in factories, and in addition having women as political officers, as in pushing ideology and so on in factories and the like. So people that came from the Soviet Union when they started to relax the immigration rules in the 1980s, shortly before they fell to pieces. And some of those people came to Australia, and they would, what sort of work did you do? I was an engineer. Oh, okay. Well, wow. What did you do? I repaired men's shoes. What? What are you talking about? Your shoe repair? You said you're an engineer. Oh yeah, I was a shoe engineer. So they invented all these odd titles, and also invented a lot of jobs, and for women. So talking to a woman, said, "Oh, I was an economist." Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, can you have an economist in a communist economy? I don't know that you can you? Given everything sort of centrally planned, what does an economist actually do? So what she meant by it, or what they meant in the Soviet Union by economist, is a woman who would fill out the forms on how many widgets they made that week in factory X, and then send that into the central communist planning secretariat. And so this was quite a powerful position, not because it had power or had meaning or achieved or produced or created anything, but this was a political officer. So if she said, if your budget was to make 100 widgets and you didn't make 100 widgets, then somebody from the Communist Party secretariat would be coming out and they'd be, well, it must be because you're not revolutionary enough. You're not a good communist. You must be a counter-revolutionary. Maybe you're a bourgeois son, so maybe it's off to the prison camps for you. So you had to be a little careful. And so these women had a lot of power, because if they said, rightly or wrongly, that you weren't making your budget, as in the widgets manufactured, then you could be in a lot of trouble. So because of that, these women had a lot of influence that was out of all proportion to the importance of the role they had. All they did was hand in that fucking form. And if you made 100 widgets, if your budget was 100 widgets and you made 100 widgets, that didn't mean that that's what she put on the form. Maybe you displeased her in some way, and or maybe she could say, well, I overheard Ivan saying that he disagreed with Comrade Stalin or something. So you had to be cautious. So these women actually had a lot of power, again, out of all proportion. They were just ideological hacks and goons. Maybe similar in power to people like diversity officers and HR departments that you see around the West today. They're the communist ideological commissars of the Soviet era, just repackaged for the West in the modern day era. But this idea of when the communist system collapsed in the Soviet Union, many of these women, huge swathes of them, were suddenly unemployed because the jobs, they weren't real jobs, they were unneeded, and these people were just ideological goons. They actually had no skills. They couldn't do any work. They couldn't actually build or create anything. They were just passenger flunkies. And so the jobs in the Soviet Union, as it became Russia, changed to being the sort of jobs that a less communist economy had, and women became hairdressers and kindergarten teachers, as they would in so this idea of we educated women had a great education and they were given important jobs, equality and equity and this sort of stuff, which the Soviets never stopped writing about. Even Comrade Stalin, as he was signing hundreds of death warrants for hundreds of men every day, would turn up to women's conferences talking about equality for women. I mean, this murderous fuck was talking about equality. So where does moral decline? How do we measure moral decline? Now, the moral decline that we're told today is if you're against mass migration, then you're a morally bankrupt individual. But it was that's a very recent sort of reading of what moral decline is, and it's an invented one. It's not a real one. It's not an organic one. It's an invented one, invented by narrative and forced on us by narrative. So it's as the Soviets did, is purely ideological, and it can't last. It will collapse. Now, whether it collapses today, tomorrow, or 20 years from now, and it doesn't matter, but it will still collapse, as it did in the Soviet Union. So any society that promotes people in anything other than some form of merit is going to collapse in the end. It won't last. And that's the path that the West is on now, all globalist inspired and controlled. You've got people like the President of the United States, who's a non-compass guy and has been for years. I remember looking at the raw footage of Biden speaking in 2000 and before the 2020 election, and the guy could barely put a sentence together then. Now they inject him with whatever they're injecting with to get him for specific, to gin him up for specific, juice him up for specific events. But it was short, sharp. It was reading from the teleprompter, and I was surprised in the presidential debates for the 2020 election how Biden managed. Now he got a lot of help from the moderators and this sort of thing, but and he stuck to a tight script. But he I don't think he understood a lot of what he was saying, but he at least was able to regurgitate the talking points, which is better than I thought he would do, by the way. But I'd seen so many cuts of him, slurring and forgetting where he was and forgetting his lines and really, it looked. I thought, there's no way this guy can win the election. But when you've got that much of the media machine and 21, 22 million votes magically appear from nowhere. They can make anybody win at any time they want. So moral decline is I know. First time I went to San Francisco, and I would have been, I don't know, 23 or 24, and I was going to Silicon Valley, but the hotel they booked me in was in San Francisco. So it's a nice hotel, and so I went down to Fisherman's Wharf and saw for the first time this thing called sourdough bread. I thought, oh, what's that? And I tried it. But and it's a bit of a like a tourist spot. And I did the tourist thing. So I had a Sunday off, or a Saturday, I think it was. So I went to Alcatraz and that. But one of the things I remember is, and I'd never seen this before, was gay guys or people. I didn't sort of understand the gay scene really. People with arseless chaps, or one cheek hanging out, the other one had a pocket in it, and they have a pocket, and the gay guys will walk on together with their hand in each other's ass pocket of these, half arseless chaps, if you like. And I'd never seen that before. And I remember looking at it thinking, holy fuck, what's going on here? And I had to look at it and sort of, am I seeing this? And I thought maybe it's some sort of that they're doing some sort of stage play, or it's a movie, or I didn't work. And then I realized it was kind of going on everywhere. And this bar that was nearest the hotel that they booked me into, I went into the bar, and it turns out it was a gay bar. And I sort of was in there with just got a beer, and then looking around, realized that it was all men being very intimate with one another. And I'd never seen that sort of thing before. Now, is that moral decline? I don't know. Is it equality? Is it equity? Is it should it have been that overt? Should it have been sort of pushed at you? And these were. It wasn't long after the Harvey Milk episode. I don't know if anyone knows that. He was a councillor, I think, in the San Francisco local city government. He was a gay guy, Harvey Milk, Jewish and gay, and into equality and all this sort of stuff. And he'd been elected to council in an area that was quite gay and Jewish. And then he was, I'm going from memory here, but I think he was assassinated by somebody, and another councillor, I think it might have been. And this was after they'd had harsh words with each other, and this was something they touted as a look at this, gay Jewish guy being shot, and so this was touted as moral decline. So which is the moral decline? Do we even know anymore? Is there a way we can determine what moral decline is? Gay guys holding each other's asses in public in large numbers, with ass cheeks hanging out of their assless chaps. That's not moral decline. But shooting a gay Jewish guy is moral decline. Allowing millions and millions of illiterate peasants just to walk into the country, that's not moral decline. But trying to stop them is moral decline, or representing moral decline. So we need to really, is there a reset here? But do we even understand what moral decline is? My definition of moral decline is a social behavior that will lead to the demise of the civilization, or indeed that social structure at the time. So coming back to the Soviet Union, putting lesbians in managerial positions, and gay guys and women into managerial positions generally just for ideological reasons or for equity outcome reasons will guarantee the demise of that society. And I believe we're seeing that in the West playing out right now in real time. Now, either the globalists don't care, or they consider the destruction of a confident, high-achieving society such as Western societies were, not so much today, but were, that demise of a confident, high-achieving society leaves the road and the door open for them to take complete control of the remnants and whatever's left over that they assume through universal basic income and mass consumption of monopoly-controlled essentials of life, such as food and housing and so on, they'll still be able to have their windfall zero risk profits. It's just everyone else is going to be paying for it. So either that, or they've miscalculated in a big way, and when the pieces do collapse, their vision of the easy money nirvana that they will have will also collapse. And we see this in the idea in the Soviet Union that the Soviet Union would collapse within 12 months from, say, 1987 or something. Like if you went back to the Soviet Union today, and I remember 87, 88, and those times, it was considered unthinkable by any onlooker that the Soviet Union was on the verge of collapse. But miscalculation, overreach, a bit of blundering, all mixed in together, and suddenly it all falls to pieces because it never had anything underwriting it. There was not government by consent. There was not government by truth and accuracy. There was no merit in appointing people to do jobs. There was jobs being invented to create this illusion of everybody works, everybody consumes, everybody's equal. So there was no underwriting pillars that kept it together, and eventually it was always going to fall over for the moral decline reasons that I've mentioned. Coming now to authority. Now, authority, when it's not by popular consent, is not authority, and we're looking in the West today that the globalists can simply install a president. I mean, look what they're doing with Kamala now. I mean, for fuck's sake, they can simply install a president. They can rig elections. Look at the United Kingdom. They can just install their own candidate. The globalists, we want him, put him in there, or her, or whatever it is. They can just install their own candidates, and they're in complete control of the process. Same happens in Australia. A prime minister that isn't towing the globalist line is out, and so they can get rid of any elected leader, prime minister. It's more difficult in the United States, where the president has that position for 4 years. But look at the way they tried to obstruct Trump in his first term. They did everything they could to fuck him up and slow things down, slow walk things and undermine them and so on. This is the power that the globalists have. But none of their authority is legitimate. None of it is derived by popular consent. Now, we can go back to an authoritarian past, say in the days of an all-powerful monarchy, for example. So, the kings and princes of feudal Europe, or emperors in China, or czars in Russia, wherever it is, the authority, their authority was, or for a while at least, close to absolute, and they were able to trade off this. I was appointed by God. God appointed me to be king or queen or whatever. Therefore, if you dispute my authority, you dispute the authority of God. And wow, I mean, you're in deep shit if you do that. So they legitimized themselves by saying that they were actually appointed, and some even going as far to say they were actually God's representative. And when aristocrats saw the power of, say, the Pope as an example, being God's representative, they thought, "Ooh, I want a bit of that." So there's legitimate. They were making themselves legitimate through, in this case, religion and a supposed connection with God. There's also the dynastic side of things, in as much as, I'm the son of the previous king, therefore I'm legitimate through bloodlines. Now, the idea of legitimate authority in those times of an all-powerful monarchy, a lot of this was supported by the people around them, because if there was a disputed, other people were claimants to the throne and say, "Well, I'm the cousin of so-and-so, I'm the nephew of," and you'd get all these multiple claimants to the throne, then that typically would lead to civil war, or at the very least, a great deal of disruption and confusion and uncertainty. It was bad for business. People who relied on the patronage of the monarch, were worried, and, holy crap, if the other guy gets in, I'll be out of a job, and, all that sort of stuff. So stability and continuity were very much something that people wanted. They didn't want a drawn-out civil war. And if you look at the British throne, the British crown, there were, well, William the Conqueror, 1066, and the Battle of Hastings. But there are also other times where there was disputed claims to the English throne, and there were frequent, if not outright civil wars, certainly periods of great disruption and uncertainty and the like. But so the idea of claiming authority had to have some sort of popular consent, and this was not only the God has ordained it and that sort of stuff, but there had to be a degree of popular consent. Now, that element of popular consent, particularly in the scientific age, that element of popular consent began to increase, in as much as through elections, but also because the aristocrats in England in particular, they wanted to share power with the monarch. And if you want to tax us, if you want to go to war and impose taxes and do these sorts of things, then, or arbitrarily impose costs upon us, we want some sort of say in this. We want to be consulted. And that was really where the sharing of power came. It wasn't just because they wanted the aggravation of having to make decisions. They wanted to avoid the arbitrary nature of power that the monarch could invoke. Now, a sensible monarch with lots of consent from the people around them probably wouldn't have done that. Wouldn't have just arbitrarily decided to go to war and levy all these costs and expenses on others. Also, things like arbitrary arrest and that sort of stuff. The power of the monarch had to be limited to such an extent that there was popular consent, at least from the nobles at that time. Now, popular consent today is if through the will of the people. Now, in the democratic process being people vote for the government that they want, whether it be via a direct majority vote, or whether it be via say in the case of the United States, a Republican sort of process, and the electoral college and that type of thing. The idea of the will of the people and popular consent is that the people are consenting to the changeover of power, or to the continuation of government, and are consenting to the policies that are put forward. Now, the globalists have entered the scene now in the power in what was once a democratic process, and nobody saw this coming. First, they took over the political machines, the Democrat Party machine, the Republican Party machine, and the party machines in Europe and Britain and so on. The globalists came in and took over those, took control of those. And therefore, who is appointed, who gets a gig, who will be the people up for election, and who will be the leaders up for election, to ensure that only their candidates. Now, nobody foresaw this. There wasn't a time. She'd gone back to the days of William Gladstone and William Pitt and all that sort of thing in Britain. That they couldn't have conceived of something like this happening. But now the globalist power machine has entered the process directly. It's completely corrupted what otherwise would have been popular consent. And authority derived from popular consent is genuine organic authority. Even if you disagree with it, it is genuine and organic. But without popular consent, then the authority, whoever wields the authority of the government, does not have the popular consent of the people. And therefore it is not supported. So we're looking at a situation now across the entire Western world where, certainly in the United States, Britain, France, and elsewhere, Holland even to some extent, that the government does not reflect the will of the people, and its authority is thus diminished. Now, once you get illegitimate authority that wants to exercise its authority whilst being illegitimate, then it relies heavily on propaganda, coercion, and using, politicizing the police and the army to go and force the population to be compliant, which is where we're at now in the West. A hopelessly politicized police department that's really just now an organ of the globalist enforcement machine. So we need to, I guess, come to grips with this idea of moral decline and how we measure it, and authority and how legitimate it is, and how those two interact to create the dynamics of what we're seeing in the West today. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.